Hey, how's it going? Today I'm going to be going over one of the less exciting parts of being a gun owner, buying targets. I mostly shoot on my parents' property out in the boonies, and you gotta have targets to have a range. Paper targets work fine for close range rifle shooting and shooting groups, but steel gives you instant feedback on if you hit or not. Just don't shoot steel at 15 yards with steel core ammo. Found that out right quick. For context, a buddy shot M855 at a steel target, and I caught a piece of jacket on the cheek. Be careful with steel core. But anyway, with that safety tip out of the way, let's go over a brand I found on Amazon and have purchased quite a few times, Highwild. Highwild targets are purportedly made from AR500 steel, which isn't a great choice for body armor, feel free to fight me in the comments, but is a fantastic choice for targets. I'm going to be going over two different targets and assemblies today. The full-size silhouette, which is 1.5 inches thick, and the stand, rated for rounds up to .338 Lapua, and some 3/8 inch swingers, rated up to 30-06. So right off the bat, AR500 targets do not last forever. No steel target will. You know, due to the fact that you're fucking shooting them a lot of the times with rifle cartridges. But if you're trying to increase longevity or the maximum rated rifle rounds it can take, go for the 1/2 inch. One of the Highwild targets I bought a long time ago, close to 3 years, formed a huge crack and had its head fall off after being shot with 8x56 rimmed, 8mm Mauser, and a bunch of 7.62x54R from a buddy's surplus rifles. I'm not going to say that if this target was a 1/2 inch thick it wouldn't have sustained serious damage, but it probably wouldn't have fucking died like this one did. Anyways, let's talk about the 3/8 inch swingers. I've gotten 2 sets of these, both from my cousins as a Christmas gift, funnily enough. Pro tip, if a friend or family has land to shoot at, gift them targets. Not only will it make them happy, but you get to use the targets the next time you shoot there. It's a win-win. The first target stand, over the course of 2 years, was shot to shit and eventually fell almost completely apart. You can technically still use it, but it does not stand up even. It also looks like the standard streetcar in New Orleans. I've had a new one for about 3 months, and the stand has only been shot about a dozen times. The actual targets from the old stand are still totally functional. I would just need to find a new way to mount them. The targets mount using an assortment of washers and nuts that keep them angled slightly downward, which is good for safety. That's more projectiles going down into the dirt instead of back into your jugular. And these are swinger targets, so when you shoot them, they swing. Don't expect to be able to do quick follow-up shots unless you are just badass as fuck. The stand also comes apart into 5 pieces for easy transport or storage. This new one definitely is not getting transported though because they shipped it crushed. The legs on the stand are hollow, and 2 out of the 4 of them were bent out of shape, so we had to hammer them back and use fucking vice grips to actually get them in. Not great, but that's also probably the fault of UPS and not Highwild. All in all, I'd say this is a solid setup. Very useful for practicing short target transitions. You can get this set for about $140 for the 3/8 inch version, or $160 for the 1/2 inch version. Honestly, I would say just go for the 1/2 inch version. It'll last longer and doesn't add that much to the price. The only downside I can see with the thicker targets is weight if you have to move them. I rarely move the targets, so it's not a big deal. But if you have to pack up your targets after each range trip, I can see it being a nuisance. You can also buy just the stand itself for about 85 bucks, but I'll be honest, I'm not sure if it's worth it. There are also other swinging target stands on the market for cheaper, that are more robust, but the advantage here is that this is easy to transport. And next up is the full-size target and stand in 1/2 inch thick. The silhouette is the standard full-size 12x20 inches and is attached to the stand using a 2x4. It was pretty easy to assemble and even has a pretty robust spring assembly in the back. Not entirely sure what it does, but it's a cool feature and probably reduces a little bit of stress on the 2x4, if I had to guess. Again, I'm not sure. And onto the fun part about this target, I did some damage testing. So before I switched from a 20-inch barrel to a 16-inch barrel in my AR-10, I shot some full-power 150 grain 308 at the target at about 30 yards, which, yes, is too close, but I was wearing eye pro, so we're all good. And noticed some very gnarly pitting. This was just with ball ammo. Not armor piercing, no steel core, and it's fucking up this target pretty good. I chrono'd it, and it was going about 2850 feet per second, which is substantial. After stepping down to a 16-inch barrel on the 308, I shot it again and noticed significantly less damage. Very, very slight pitting, maybe a 0.5 millimeter at most. These rounds chrono'd about 200 feet per second slower, so it makes sense.
I don't know which of these is which, but these are clearly our 2 hits. Maybe. So on this one, yeah, we get a, that's lead, but I don't really care. That is a tiny bit of pitting. Tiny. Whereas the 20-inch barrel was leaving these craters.
I then had some fun with 5.56, which is where I was really concerned about the target. Keep in mind that both of these following guns were shot with a Sandman K suppressor, so maybe 1 or 2 extra feet per second of velocity. It doesn't seem to make that much of a difference. M193 out of a 10.3 inch barrel did absolutely nothing. There was no noticeable pitting whatsoever. Against my better judgment, I shot some M855 at this target, and out of the 10.3 inch barrel, we had a pretty solid divot actually. I also somehow got a higher velocity reading out of the M855 than I did the M193, so I don't know if my chrono's just fucked or if I'm brain dead. The M193 clocked in at 2,556, and the M855 clocked in at 2,557. I know that heavier projectiles generally perform better in short barrels with 5.56, but I wasn't expecting that. What the fuck? Maybe this Lake City ammo is counterfeit? I don't know. Next, with a 16-inch barrel and M193, we got a velocity of 2950, which is pretty good, and a really solid divot. Pretty comparable to the M855 out of the 10.3. But when we switched to M855 out of the 16-inch barrel, going 2,900 feet per second, holy shit. This dug a pretty solid crater in there. Crater might be an exaggeration, but this was a pretty significant hit right here. So in conclusion with this very limited test, don't use M855, and especially don't use it out of a 16-inch barrel. That is if you're shooting within 100 yards and you actually care about the longevity of your steel targets. Unfortunately, those are the only two lengths of 5.56 barrels I have right now. Eventually I'll get a 20-inch and probably something shorter like an 8-inch just for fun. From these results though, and what I read on velocity charts, I imagine an M16 with a 20-inch barrel would absolutely fucking shred these targets, especially with M855. I don't have any M855 Alpha 1, but I imagine out of a 20-inch barrel it would probably bore halfway through the fucking target. Anyway, in conclusion, I'm a fan of these target setups. The stands themselves might be a little pricey, but the targets themselves are a fantastic value. At least from the tests I've done, these appear to be genuine AR500 steel, and as long as you're smart, they should last a pretty long time. These are the first target and stand systems I've owned, and I want to try something else. If you have any recommendations for steel targets that won't break the bank, let me know in the comments. But as always, it doesn't matter if you shoot steel or paper, as long as you're training. Get out there and shoot, and get some exercise. Take care.